Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee on Wednesday, the 2nd of February 2022. Could I ask Charlotte if there are any apologies or substitutions, please?
No, morning. I haven't been advised of any apologies or substitutions for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Could I then ask you to take a roll call for today's meeting? Thank you.
Yes, I will do. If you just confirm your attendance when I call your name in alphabetical order, please. Obviously, we'll have Councillor Duff this morning. Councillor Ahern.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Donaldson.
Present, and just to say, I think my chat function is muted.
Okay. Councillor Drysdale.
Present.
Councillor Forbes.
Morning, I'm here.
Okay. Councillor Lang.
Present.
Okay. Councillor Lyle.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Good morning.
Okay. Councillor McEwen. Councillor McEwen.
Present. Yeah, present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Provost Malloy.
Present.
Councillor Parrott.
Yep.
Councillor Shires.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Okay. And Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson? No, it seems we don't have Councillor Wilson yet this morning, but everybody else is in. Thank you.
Charlotte, there's a message in the chat that Councillor Wilson is trying to reboot and get back in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully he'll join us soon.
I'm sure he will. Thank you very much for that, Charlotte. Could I ask if there are any declarations of interest? I don't see any in the chat function. Give it a few seconds. But Councillor Donaldson, I see you. Your hand up. You're on mute, Stuart.
Thank you, convener. Non-financial interest in respect of Horsecross.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that declaration of interest. If we could move on then, please. And item 3 is the minutes of various meetings. Can we agree the minute of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee of the 24th of November 2021?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we note the minute of the Property Subcommittee of the 25th of October 2021?
Noted.
And can we note the minutes of the Employees Joint Consultative Committee of 27th September 2021?
Noted.
And can we note the minute of the Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board of the 29th September 2021?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. And finally, can we note the minute of the Tay Cities Deal Joint Committee of the 17th of September 2021?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. Okay, item 4 then is the Revenue Budget 2021-22 update number 4. And I would ask Scott Walker, please, to introduce the report.
So thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. This latest revenue monitoring report sets out projected underspends and additional income on the general fund of £5.127 million. Council services are contributing £4.527 million to this position, with additional projected council tax income of £600,000 making up the balance. Section 2 of the report provides more information on service projections. The Executive Director of Education and Children's Services has identified projected underspends and additional income of £1.709 million. The main reasons for this favourable movement are the inclusion of updated projections for staff costs and supplies and services, as well as the recognition of additional income from the Scottish Government. Within the devolved school management scheme, a planned underspend of £776,000 is identified at paragraph 2.11, and a planned underspend of £600,000 on the pupil equity fund is identified at paragraph 2.12. Both of these projected underspends have arisen as budgets are allocated by financial year, whereas expenditure is incurred by academic year. The Executive Director of Communities has identified projected underspends and additional income of £2.158 million. The Communities budget for 21-22 includes £4.1 million of projects approved by Council in March 21. To date, the service has delivered around 62% or £2.6 million of these projects. However, for the reasons set out in paragraph 2.14, approximately £1.5 million of activity on projects will require to be rephased into next financial year in order to ensure delivery. It is anticipated that we will seek the Council's approval to carry these resources forward at the special meeting of the Council on 23rd of February. The Chief Operating Officer is projecting underspends and additional income totalling £672,000 within corporate and democratic services. This favourable movement is due specifically to updated staff cost projections, reviews of service-wide budgets and additional income. Apologies for the typo at paragraph 2.20, where the figure should be £431,000 rather than £431,000 million. Finally, the 21-22 pay discussions are yet to be finalised, with teaching unions not yet accepting the offer from employers. In section 3, the committee is provided with an update on health and social care, where a projected overspend of £273,000 is identified. It is anticipated that this will be funded by the IGP's own reserves and therefore has no direct financial impact on the Council. At section 3.3, we provide an update on council tax income. We are still projecting that the actual level of council tax income will exceed budget. However, the last few months have demonstrated a slight reduction in collection compared with the 5-year average, and this is set out in the graph in paragraph 3.6. The collection rate to the end of January, which became available yesterday, has also continued to reduce against the 5-year average. On that basis, we have reduced our projected over-recovery of council tax income to £600,000. In section 4, we provide an update on the housing revenue account, where an £82,000 variance is identified, which will allow us to increase the level of capital to be funded from current revenue. Section 4 also provides an update on our ALIOs. Council officers are still working with colleagues from Horsecross Arts and Live Active Leisure to more fully understand the financial implications of the restrictions announced prior to Christmas. We will be able to provide a more comprehensive update in the next monitoring report. Section 5 provides an update on additional funding that has been confirmed since the last committee, and most of this additional income was identified in the finance circular that was issued by the Scottish Government on the 20th of December last year. Section 6 includes an update on loan charges and sets out the impact on the current year of recent borrowing, which is covered in the Treasury Management Report later. And finally, in Section 7, we're seeking approval to make a number of contributions to and from reserves. Firstly, at paragraph 7.1, we are seeking authority to start applying resources to the set-up costs for the new Bertha Park Primary School. With this being a completely new school, there are no existing budgets to transfer in, and the Council did adopt a similar approach prior to the opening of Bertha Park High School. Secondly, at paragraph 7.2, we're looking to apply current year underspends towards decant or temporary accommodation costs associated with the school estate. The remainder of this section is seeking approval to make several transfers in or out of reserves to ensure funding is in place for the North Inch Golf Course, carbon dioxide monitoring, the Community Investment Fund, financial insecurity, early learning and childcare and affordable housing. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I have a question from Councillor Wilson. And I know Councillor Donaldson has a question too. Councillor Wilson first, please.
Convener, thank you and good morning. My apologies for a slightly late arrival. This was due to technical issues at this end. I'm on page 32, Convener, item 2.5 ECS and 2.6 staff costs. The slippage there of just over £600,000. Do we have a percentage of what that might be? Is my first question. My second question is to what are the consequences for staffing in schools on that, and It's been a hard time for schools like everyone else, but I don't know if the Executive Director wants to make a comment on that. And the third point is that given what I want to respect confidentiality here, Convener, but in our budget papers there's an item on this subject. The percentage that's represented here in the figures and the percentage that we've been given, are they in similar vein, or should we take that discussion offline and discuss it as part of the BRG group? So I'll accept the Executive Director's advice on that. Thank you.
Okay, I think there's a lot to unpack there, Councillor Wilson, but I can ask for a response.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, in relation to your question about the staff slippage, what I can tell you is that of that total amount, £66,000 relates to primary schools and £77,000 relates to secondary, so very small amounts in terms of the slippage there. And we have been able to recruit swiftly and routinely to almost all posts, and so there is no issue around the recruitment there and not being able to spend the budgets in relation to primary and secondary. The largest part of the slippage amount actually relates to work in early years where there are a number of vacant posts, but those are vacant posts that are not impacting on service delivery at this time. Thank you. And in relation to your question about a budget review process, I think that would be a separate discussion to that which we would discuss here at SPNR today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I note Mr. Boland has put an A in the chat. Is there anything you wish to add to that, Greg?
No, thank you, Councillor Duff. Sheena's answered the question. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I have Councillor Donaldson then, please.
Thank you, Convener. I asked about this prior to Christmas. I ask again because there have been developments. It's two of the big items are pay and inflation, 2.3 on inflation. Could we be provided with an update on what we're now anticipating on the overall level of inflation for 22-23?
Okay. Thank you. Who can take this one?
Councillor
Scott,
I'll start it, and then
yes,
Karen
please.
Donaldson might want to come on the pay. In terms of the inflation, Councillor Donaldson, the December inflation figures that were published in the middle of January, CPI is sitting at 5.4% and RPI is currently sitting at 6.3%, and those figures will be updated obviously later on this month with the January position.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Donaldson, Convener, are you happy I respond to
yes,
the
please.
second part? Yeah,
yes, please.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, in respect of the current year to which this paper relates, there has been agreement and payment of the pay settlement for Scottish Joint Council employees, craft and chief officials. However, the teaching trade unions, the teaching side, have still not accepted the pay deal for 21-22, and as such that matter remains unresolved.
Okay, could I do a quick follow-up here?
Indeed, carry on.
Specifically on inflation, and Scott Walker has given us figures on CPI and RPI. Obviously, we receive advice from Link and I think from Capital Economics. There's also a graph we showed in one of the papers prior to Christmas, and the difference between the forecast in March of 2020, March 2021, and then in October. But almost was still that, you know, inflation would be transitory. But we've got 1.25% increase in national insurance. That is definitely coming. We've got inflation on energy coming through. So that is the question I was asking. Are we taking the view that inflation will be transitory, or in fact from current levels the December figures is going to increase from that point? Because it's not just about materials required by property and housing maintenance teams, it's across the board.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you for the question. So the budget papers that we're producing is building inflation in. Councillor Donaldson been aware that he's seen some of the rates that we're using on some of the IL contracts, for example. We're also having to uplift our energy projections on the basis of the latest projections from the Scottish Government. So inflation is probably the biggest pressure that the council is facing right now, and that will be right through the revenue budget report that the council will consider on the 23rd of February.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, that's fine just now. It's a problem that simply has not gone away, and cost of living is a major, major issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ahern, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is on paragraph 7.1, which is the Bertha Park Primary School, and the proposed to transfer 270,000 into restricted funds. I'm not quite sure what they mean by setting up cost, and I don't know whether that includes IT equipment such as smart displays, desks and everything else. So I'd like to know why, or I'd like to know sort of what that covers, and also what is proposed to have the total fund to be, and what it's going to cost in the end, and also why it wasn't done for the likes of the Riverside Primary School. I know that's a replacement school, but you're not going to be taking equipment out of the old North Muirton and Bahousie schools, so you're going to need to require to equip the new school with new equipment. So are these equipments that you're talking about, is this not part of the capital and not the revenue?
Okay, thank you. I think Sheena Devlin would like to start off and answer, and maybe Greg Boland add to that, but Sheena.
Convener, I'm happy to defer to Greg Boland, and we'll just have one of us respond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg, then.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Ahern. So similar to what we did with Bertha Park High School, because it's a brand new school, we don't have all the resources that will move or be part of the capital project. So obviously the classroom materials, the IT equipment, various things within the school, telephones, etc., all need to be kind of built into the new school. Obviously, a lot of those materials all transfer from when we replace the school. So, as example, you use the North Muirton and Balhousie, the stuff will be moved across to the school for the teachers and for all the staff. So there'll be additional costs as part of this kind of brand new additional school as part of the setup.
So the other part of my question was, is a lot of that not capital, and what's the total fund projected to be?
So our estimated total figure we think we require is around about £500,000. It's obviously made up of staff costs, IT stuff, various things that need to start up the school. I'm just looking at my list here. So we've got IT, we've got staff, we've got iPads, we've got office materials, staff, equipment, office equipment, and facility management kind of services. So it's kind of a combination of stuff. Until we actually have the built up recurring revenue DSM budget, then there'll be costs until the school's up and operational.
Thank you. I think perhaps Scott Walker wishes to add to this.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Duff. If I could just add, the other reason we're doing this now is that the opportunities to create capacity going forward will be tougher as budgets get tighter. So we're being prudent in putting the money aside now when we have it. We might not be able to do it as easily going forward.
Thanks. Yeah, I understand that and agree with that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm at paragraph 2.1 on the first page of this report, The overall underspend this year at this time seems to be rather higher than I remember in previous years, but I may be mistaken. But would it be fair to typify the level of this underspend as largely due to the friction occasioned by the COVID pandemic in its various forms? That's the first part of my question, if I may. And the second is point 7.3 and 7.4 on page 40. Could we be told, if you like, what locations this money will be required in for decants? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. I did actually have a look at this myself, going back a few years, and actually the figure for this year at 1.1% is the second lowest figure in the last 6 years if we exclude 2020, given that COVID arrived. Prior to that, it was 1.2, 1.4, 1.2, 1.01 and 2.23.
In that case, I'm mistaken on that point.
So we're actually, I did have a look at that just because it occurred to me, Councillor Parrott, but I'll leave Mr Walker to respond to any other parts of the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Duff. I was just going to agree with you. It's pretty consistent with where we are normally at this time of year. The only thing I would add is that obviously COVID has contributed to that. So we're delivering underspends in different areas, if you like. And I think Ms Devlin will answer the second part of the question.
Thank you, Sheena.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Parrott, in relation to your question about locations, there will be various, and they will include decants and temporary accommodation requirements that would be associated with some of the following. So Ruthvenfield Primary, Pitcairn Primary, Braco, Methven and Perth High School. So there's a range of things that are in the planned programme that will require a combination of some decants, some temporary accommodation to allow the works to be completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. Now, Councillor Barrett, please. Councillor Barrett, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, Convener. Okay. Thank you. There isn't any commentary in the report on the increased losses associated with the Perth Harbour operations under increase in operating costs shortfall of income in Appendix 2 on page 51. The budgeted deficit net loss for the harbour for the current year is approximately 171,000 and is the predicted outturn for the harbour for 21-22 now a deficit of 291,000, exceeding the predicted loss by £120,000, and are losses expected to return in line with the business plan or to continue at a level of almost £300,000 a year?
Scott, are you in a position to take this, or is someone else?
I wonder if colleagues from Community Service might have the detail to support this question.
Okay, thank you.
If I may start, and other colleagues may wish to join, you know, sort of in Councillor Duff. I think that the harbour was covered in more detail in the last SPNR report from memory. So my understanding is that, you know, sort of we continue to work with the Harbour Board and the operator to ensure that we try and minimise the, you know, sort of the income or, you know, sort of deficit as far as possible. But I don't know, I don't think David or Serge, I could be wrong, are here at committee, but we can certainly, you know, sort of reply in a bit more detail. I'm just looking through the list. I can't see either of them here, but happy to respond to all of the members of the committee in due course with a bit more information.
Okay, I see Caroline France may wish to add to the question. Caroline?
Yeah, thank you. Just to, as Barbara says, we probably can provide more detailed information, but some of the costs are one-off costs from this year that were included in the consultancy and in the harbour dredging. So some of the costs aren't expected to be recurring, but we can reply with more information. I hope that helps.
Thank you, and Councillor Barnett.
Convener, it helps slightly, but it doesn't, I think, address my concerns adequately. I raise serious concerns about the level of risk associated with the deliverability of the Perth Harbour business plan and the inability to achieve the necessary deficit reductions and increases in ships. Losses for the harbour over the course of this council term are now exceeding £1 million. And I think, given that the exposure the council now faces in regard to significant and increasing losses, and the statement made by the leader of the council last September when this was discussed, that a strategic review of harbour operations would be a matter for the next council, I'd like to ask the Chief Executive if he'll agree to conduct an urgent strategic or best value review and bring forward a report to the next council at the very earliest stage on harbour operations.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing me in. At this point, I will take advice from officers in terms of the work that has previously been done. I wouldn't be committing to bring a report back to the next council, given the next council special council, but if members are minded, I will provide a briefing and bring a report back at an appropriate point.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Convener. My question is about the proposals that are in paragraphs 7.2 and 7.4. In those, what's being proposed is that we put some money into some quite specific earmarked reserves, and the money won't be actually spent until future years, beyond the coming financial year. My question is, if a political group wished to, when we sit for our budget in a few weeks' time, would it be competent to use that money for other things in the coming year if that group then planned to find those funds, those resources in future years and refill those earmarked reserves in time for when those things are happening in 2026 in one of the cases? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is Mr. Walker or from a governance aspect. Scott, do you have a view on this?
I'm happy to start. So,
yep.
The proposals we're bringing forward, we think are prudent. We know about these costs. It's very likely that the decant temporary accommodation costs will start to be incurred next year. We know that we're going to have a pressure for Bertha Park High School in a few years, and we know we're going to have less capacity to start building that up. If you choose not to earmark these, the funding would end up in uncommitted reserves. So it would then be for a further decision to be made at a point in time. But we think we're doing the prudent thing by identifying resources at this time to apply to known pressures.
Apologies, Convener and Mr. Walker. My question was slightly different to that. My question was, is it competent if these recommendations are approved today, is it competent for a group to use that money for a different purpose in the coming financial year and then refill the pots in the financial year afterwards?
Convener, I can perhaps clarify. If a decision is making today as regards these sums, then any decision would be subject to the 6-month rule, and unless there was a material change, that matter couldn't be revisited.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. My question relates to the Chief Operating Officer's answer on the pay inflation. I think what we were told was that all staff except for teachers, the pay rise for this financial year was settled, and teachers were teaching staff were still that negotiation was still going on. In just a few short weeks' time, we will be, as elected members, asked to set the budget for the next financial year. Obviously, one of the things that we will not know going into that budget setting process or into the start of the financial year, or possibly 10, 11 months into the next financial year, is whether it is what the pay inflation rate actually will be agreed upon. Have officers made any representations, or are they aware of COSLA making any representations about yet about starting the next year's pay negotiations early, so that you know, for example, in come next year's budget process, we would know what the following year was going to be before we started the budget process.
Okay, thank you. I think the Chief Operating Officer would like to respond. Karen?
Thank you. Councillor Stewart, both the SJC and the Chief Officers groups have submitted their pay claims to COSLA, so that has commenced the pay negotiations for next year. These are at early stages, but the ball has been set rolling for that. The SNCT group, which covers teachers, have not submitted a pay claim for next year as yet. Their focus at the moment is resolving the current year's pay negotiations. So yes, the process has started, Councillor Stewart, and that is handled at a national level, and COSLA leaders discussed that last week.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sorry, just a quick follow-up, if that's okay, convener. So the process for next financial year's pay rise, pay negotiations has started, but as we've heard, you know, we're 10 months into this financial year. We still don't know what the outcome of the pay negotiations from the start of the financial years. So, you know, I wonder if officers or COSLA would be willing to make representation about speeding that process up and starting the following year early to benefit the council's budget setting process.
Councillor Stewart, I think every local authority would welcome early resolution in terms of the pay negotiations to give some certainty for the revenue budget for 22-23. In fact, in previous years we have enjoyed multi-year settlements, which has allowed a longer term planning horizon for pay. I think currently pay negotiations with all staff groups are complex. Trade unions are clearly concerned about workload capacity, cost of living, etc., and the employers are mindful of available resources. So these negotiations will continue at national level as quickly as they possibly can do, and I know that at the leaders' meetings, officers and or the council leader is informed from officers on the current position and provides information to support that process. Equally through other professional groups such as Solace and SPDS, we continue to support the process at a national level and feed into that via various bodies, and also the Directors of Finance group as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale, please.
Thank you, convener. I'm at 7.7, the paragraph on carbon dioxide monitoring across the school estate. If I understand the arithmetic here as set out in this paragraph, the council allocated 500,000 last June, since which time the Scottish Government has provided 253,000 of additional funding in this obviously very important area of work. But it turns out that there is an intention to move some of this funding into future financial years. The arithmetic tells me that there's a £70,000 underspend in this current year. That's 14% of the figure, and I'm just wondering, why is there an underspend, and what is the nature of that underspend in this important area?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drysdale. I don't know if that's Mr. Walker or Ms. Devlin who would like to take this.
If I could start, Councillor Drysdale, I would approach it slightly differently. We've spent £453,000. We've just not been able to spend the full amount. The council allocated £500,000 towards this back in June last year. Since then, we were obviously awarded an additional £253,000. We would always seek to spend grant in year and then carry forward the council resources. So we've spent £453,000 of activity in that area.
I think I have Mr. Beveridge also wanting to contribute, if I could ask him to respond. Thank you.
Scott's pretty much answered the question. Yeah, we've spent circa that amount of money. We're still waiting on some final invoices, etc., coming in to close off the exact amounts, but the work has been done. We're still ongoing with ventilation mitigation works as well. That is continuing, so we're still working right up to the end of financial year on work. So the figure that Scott's quoted is around where we'll be at.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, apart from a small amount of work outstanding and invoices outstanding, that work has been progressed as a matter of urgency.
Yes, it has indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And another question from Councillor Barrett, please.
Sorry to keep you waiting there, Vice Convener. Convener. On page 41, paragraph 711, approval is being sought to create an earmarked reserve for financial insecurity and to transfer 638,000 from the current year to future financial years. I just want to check whether this carried forward budget is intended to be spent in the next financial year to tackle the urgent cost of living crises and current financial insecurity experienced in our communities, rather than being carried further forward into the future than that.
Mr. Walker. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, perhaps I could start, and then I think my colleague Lynn Brady will come in with some of the specifics. But if I could just give you some history, Councillor Barrett. 2 years ago, 2021, we had a recurring budget of about 700,000. We spent £1.4 million, so £700,000. It was similar. In the current year, we're projecting a further £1.4 million over and above the recurring budget of £700,000. Next year, we expect this demand to continue, so we would expect to have to spend that next year. And perhaps Lynn Brady can give you some of the detail about what the money has been spent on.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yes. Firstly, every endeavour will be made to spend the money where it is as quickly as possible and where it's needed. In addition to having a target to spend the money as quickly as possible, we want to do it in the most meaningful way as well, that will give sustainable help to families. So, for example, everybody who comes across our desk in terms of needing help via the financial insecurity funding will also get a benefit check, so that we can ensure that they're getting everything that they're entitled to, and hopefully doesn't have the same problems going forward. What I would say is the team are doing a number of priorities and still pandemic related work. So, for example, whilst we have the remit to deal with the financial insecurity funding and we are still working on that, at times we've had to put some pause on the number of resources dealing with that. For example, to deal with other initiatives, so the low income pandemic payment, which had to be put in place for Scottish Government by the end of November. We had staff working on that for several months, and the increased pandemic work as well. In terms of crisis grants, self-isolation grants. However, everybody who contacts us will be considered for financial insecurity funding as well. And yes, we intend to make it go as far as we possibly can and spend it where and when it's needed, because there is a crisis that we're dealing with, and increased bills, etc. And part of the remit and how we use it is, for example, in relation to priority debt, to rural hardship, families with disabled children, and more. Hopefully that helps you answer your question.
Thanks very much, Convener. I didn't actually appreciate the scale of the interventions that we were making, so I'm grateful to Mr. Walker for that, and also to Lynn for the additional detail. I did wonder whether some of that money could be used to augment the school clothing budget, which is overspent, and I really appreciate the work that Lynn's team do, and the workload that they are working under as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you, Lynn, for that very helpful response. I don't see any further questions, but I know that Councillor Donaldson has problems with his chat, so I just want to check whether Councillor Donaldson has any further question he wishes to ask at this point.
That's very kind, Convener. In fact, I think my chat function is now sorted out.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions, so I will proceed to move the paper. This report provides elected members with the latest update on our 2021-22 revenue budget position, and the Chief Accountant has provided the committee with a detailed commentary on the contents of the report. The report sets out a projected underspend of £5.127 million and further reinforces this Council's reputation for sound and prudent financial management. I'd like to take the opportunity to record my thanks to the Chief Executive, Executive Directors and staff across the Council for their continued efforts in this regard. Can I draw the committee's attention to three specific proposals included within the report? Firstly, our prudent approach to financial management is further reinforced as we start to put in place funding to equip the new Bertha Park Primary School, which we agreed last August. This is a new school, not a replacement school, and therefore will incur significant non-recurring setup costs, and it's right that we begin to build up our funds in preparation for the opening. Secondly, as some of us heard at the recent Environment and Infrastructure Committee, fantastic progress continues to be made in reinvigorating the North Inch Golf Course. The new starters hut is integral to the business plan and will further improve the facilities there. And I'm delighted that the new starters hut will be in place shortly. And finally, we are drawing down additional resources of £106,000 for our hugely popular Community Investment Fund, which has been successful in supporting community organisations with tackling issues across the council area. Thanks are due to the Head of Finance and the Chief Accountant and their team for all the work they do in monitoring our revenue budget, and I look forward to receiving the final revenue monitoring paper in April. Colleagues, I'm happy to move the report. Vice Convener, would you care to second the paper?
Thank you very much, Convener. Firstly, I would just like to thank the Head of Finance and his team for bringing forward this paper today. And I also note the convener's comments, so I won't replicate them, but I would like to highlight the prudent use of reserves and thank the officers for their efforts in that regard. So I'm happy to move the paper. Second paper.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. I note that Councillor Bailey would like to move an amendment. Councillor Bailey.
Yes, thank you, Convener. What the administration propose, sorry, I'll start that again. What the administration is proposing here is that we put £1.2 million to one side to spend on things, some of which aren't needed until 2026, and others that have no fixed date attached. Doing so ties the hand of council when we sit to decide budget priorities in a few weeks from now. Most of us would agree that budget meeting and the budget review groups are the correct forum for these matters to be decided. This motion ties our hands to the tune of 1.2 million, even while those discussions are ongoing. At that budget meeting in a few weeks' time, we'll also have to set a council tax rate. If we have to set that rate without access to this £1.2 million, then we have to set it higher than we would otherwise do because this money isn't available to tackle this coming year's priorities. £1 million is equivalent to about 1.4 percentage points on the council tax rate. If we accept the recommendations in the paper today, then we're effectively borrowing £1.2 million from residents in order for that money to sit in pots, ready for things that aren't happening until future years. For clarity, I'm in full support of these items. I just think we should fund them at the budget meeting and not tie our own hands behind our backs today. In summary, the motion proposes that we squirrel away £1.2 million of the tax at the taxpayer's expense. What's worse is that we're in a year when we face a massive cost of living squeeze. This isn't even a case of tax and spend, this is tax and squirrel. I therefore have an amendment, and I wonder if committee services might be able to put the amendment on the screen for me, please, if not already. The amendment is to the effect of approving the recommendations in the paper with the exception of 7.2, 7.4, 7.12, and to transfer the amounts referenced in those paragraphs to uncommitted general fund reserves so they can be considered in the 22-23 revenue budget. So to be clear, this amendment, if it was passed, means that a group, if it so wished to, a group of councillors can still do these things, still put money into these earmarked reserves if they wish to, but if they wish to fund them later, they can do it. It essentially removes the worry of the 6-month rule. I see we don't have the amendment on screen, so I'm going to just paste it into the chat here.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Committee services, are we able to put the amendment on the screen for everyone to see? Appreciate it's going into chat, but just so that I'm certainly not seeing anything there. Okay, it's in the chat for members. Do you have a seconder?
I'd be grateful if anyone would be happy to second it. Thank you, convener.
Okay, is there anyone who is willing to second the amendment? I'm not seeing anybody who's going to come forward, Councillor Bailey, to second your amendment, in which case the amendment is falls.
Thank you, convener. I respect that. It's a shame that we're borrowing money from our residents in order to increase the tax rate, but I accept that's the decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just ask for clarification on a point you mentioned in your commentary there, that £1 million is equivalent to 1.4% of council tax. Can I just clarify whether that is in fact accurate?
I said 1.2 million is equivalent to around about a 1.4 percentage point rise in council tax, convener.
Sorry, okay, I misunderstood you then. Thank you. Okay, that means that we move on. And are there any comments on the report then? Thank you. Give anybody a chance to pop see. I don't think there's anybody who's asked to comment that I can see so far. If there are no comments, then can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Can I have my dissent noted, please, convener? Thank you.
We will. Thank you, Councillor Bailey, and thanks for everyone else for agreeing the report. We move on, and item 5 then is the Composite Capital and Housing Investment Programme paper. And again, I'll ask Mr. Walker to introduce the report. Thank you.
So thank you, excuse me, thank you, convener. This report provides an update on progress with the Council's approved capital budget and housing investment programme based upon expenditure to the end of December. Gross expenditure on the General Fund programme over the 8 years to 28-29 is currently estimated at approximately £606 million, which is a net increase of £941,000 from the position that we last reported to committee in November. In the current year, net expenditure on the General Fund programme to 31st of December totals approximately £37.5 million, or 52.3% of the proposed revised budget for 21-22. Section 3 and Appendix 2 of the report details progress with the General Fund programme to date, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. These include a rephasing of budgets for the Roads and Lighting programme, the Bridges programme, works on the Old Perth Bridge and the Queen's Bridge, and the Perth and Cnoss placemaking programme. Expenditure on the Housing Investment Programme over the 5-year period to 25-26 remains unchanged at £67.9 million. In year, net expenditure on the Housing Investment Programme to 31st December totals approximately £7.5 million, or 51.3% of the proposed revised budget for 21-22. Section 4 and Appendix 3 of the report details progress with the Housing Investment Programme to date, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. These include the acceleration of funding to support the Council House buyback scheme and rewiring, infrastructure and property refurbishment budgets. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions, convener.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. We have a question from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, convener. Thanks for the report. I'm on page 66, 3.4.4. This is IT purchase of licenses. Given the potential pressures on our budget next year, are there any other procurements that we could have brought in or could still bring in this financial year if funds permit, apart from the ones for SWIFT and audiovisual replacement?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walker.
So, Councillor Wilson, clearly that's something we keep an eye on and take any opportunities that we can. And when budget papers are shared with elected members, you may see some proposals in there to take this further, but we keep an eye on it so that we can minimise the pressure on the revenue budget if we can.
We'll try and keep our eye on it as well. Mr. Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, convener. My question is on the paragraph 3.3.2 under the heading of communities. It's described there about how £1.18 million of structural maintenance monies for the current year are being moved to the next. A sort of quick double question, if I may. First of all, what was the total funding for structural maintenance in the financial year that we're just coming to the end of? And also, can someone confirm that structural maintenance relates to the sort of the full resurfacing of stretches of roads? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, who would like to respond to that?
Fraser Crofts and Caroline France to answer that question. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Fraser then first, please. Don't know if you're on.
Apologies. I think if we can just ask my colleague Caroline France just to dig out the overall figure for structural maintenance for the current year. If I recall correctly, it's in the region of £11 million. I think we can double check that figure and come back to you. Regarding the structural work in the predominantly the work that we carried out on the road network is resurfacing work, as you described, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. And yeah, the information about which how much was allocated for that specific financial year is an important one, please.
So if we can get that information back to councillors as soon as we have it, hopefully within this meeting, certainly within this meeting.
Hopefully, if you can, within this meeting. Thank you.
Sorry, if I can come back in. My understanding from officers is that the opening budget was £16 million. And the revised budget, sort of is 14.9 million. So what we're saying is that we would be spending £14.9 million on, sort of our roads.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, then please.
Paragraph 3.36 refers to 6 Perth City Centre projects totalling about £2.5 million that are being rephased from the current financial year into next because of ongoing discussions in respect of external funding and officer capacity. I wanted to ask whether any external funding has been lost because of the rephasing and whether the scope of any of those projects is being limited due to ongoing construction inflation, and how firm is the commitment to deliver those projects in the next financial year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCrone would like to respond to this one. John, please.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Barrett. Essentially, the rephasing relates to funding leverage and the Perth People Place project. I'm pleased to say in the last couple of days we have had confirmation of funding from Sustrans to allow us to move into the design phase. Essentially, that movement will then allow, once that design exercise has been undertaken, to determine whether the projects in the city centre are delivered or whether there is a requirement in terms of alignment with other investment in Dunkeld Road in the Dunkeld Road corridor. critical to all of that will be funding leverage that the council itself has through the capital programme, and we would be intending to bring a further report to SPNR regarding movement of that resource to align with broader transport investment, because the majority of those projects relate to transport related investment, and it'll be critical in terms of network impacts, how they're delivered and how they interface with other investment in both active travel and bus corridors. So to answer the question, no funding has been lost. Au contraire, it is actually assisting help generate external funding.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Barrett.
I think it might be useful to get a timeline on those projects, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure we can manage to get information out to members in relation to that. Councillor Donaldson then, please.
Thank you, Convener. One of the largest capital projects being undertaken by the council is the Comrie Flood Protection Scheme. Could I just ask, I don't know if there's anyone, Peter Dixon or any of his team here, are we on target, are we on schedule for work to actual physical work, construction work to start on that project at the start of the next financial year? The indication earlier had been in the spring. I might as well ask at one and the same time, it's a smaller item, but it's one very dear to people in Comrie. It's been a bit of a saga, although not as long running a saga as the Creep to Comrie Core Path, but it's the Shaky Bridge in Glenlednick. Something people do care about locally. Is the hope that work again there will start at the start of the next financial year in May, June. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I think Mr. Butterworth, Mark Butterworth, will reply. Hopefully he can cover both of these. Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. In terms of the Comrie Flood Scheme, unfortunately, we don't think we're going to hit our current timescales. We are looking at the moment to revise the programme. The main reason for that is around staffing. We've just lost our internal project manager. He's left. Got a job elsewhere. The external consultant who is supporting us on the project has also recently left. We've got a significant shortfall, a staffing shortage in the flooding team, which unfortunately is affecting all our projects and flood studies, etc. So we're in the process of revising the programme for Comrie, and we will advise members when we have that programme in terms of what that is. So unfortunately, there will be some delays, but I can't tell you exactly what they are at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Donaldson, do you want to follow up on anything to do with that at the moment before we move on to the other one?
I'm disappointed that it's clearly slippage. I hear what you say about staffing constraints and staffing capacity. I think in the local community, because it is such a major project and it's important also in terms of our overall capital programme, if we can be advised on the revised timetable, and this is new to me, I think it's important that the community know. On the Shaky Bridge, and I don't know if there's anyone here from Green Space, it's a smaller ticket item, but as I say, it's something that's dear to people in Comrie. Could we get an update on that as well?
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to move on to that, Mr. Butterworth.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Again, I haven't got exact timescales. There were some delays with the project because of we needed approval from SEPA, and they had a cyber attack, which has caused some delays. So unfortunately, I haven't got the exact timescales around that project, but I can certainly provide yourself and the committee with that information after the meeting, if that's okay, or I can try to actually get that during the meeting if that's possible, or if not, I will email the committee after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Could I then just say on both items, obviously the flood protection scheme is a much bigger ticket item. It's multi-million, but on both of these, really it would be helpful to get that information as soon as possible, because both projects now look to be delayed. And I'd have thought the Shaky Bridge is, but I hear what you say about SEPA. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further requests to. Yes.
I'm not so sure then if you're seeing my chat.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't think I have, unless I've missed it. But if you have a question, please carry on.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm on paragraph 3.3.6, like Councillor Barrett. And my question is, if these projects have been slipped, we wouldn't want to see slippage further of things programmed for the next year. And I just wonder whether there was any intent to take on any additional staff resource in the short term to catch up with the programme. Thank you.
Thank you. That'd be Mr. Butterworth.
I think it's actually.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Crone, sorry.
Sorry. John McCrone, then, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, I mean, additional staff resources have actually been put in place relating to the Perth People Place project. So that is providing additional capacity to move forward that whole design exercise, which includes investment in place-related projects in terms of active travel, of which some of those projects could form part, or they will form part of alignment with the Dunkeld Road corridor. So essentially we have to go through an exercise with the funding I reference from Sustrans to determine where the best spend will occur. But we do have additional staff resources. A full staff team was recruited to assist with all those projects in April last year, with a further recruitment that took place at the end of last year to replace Mike Morgan, who departed the team. So we have a full complement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, but I will, if anybody does have one and I haven't seen it in the chat, please come in now. But if not, I will proceed to move the paper. The Chief Accountant has provided members of the committee with a detailed commentary on the contents of the Capital Monitoring Report. The report provides an update on our £606 million investment in council infrastructure across the length and breadth of our local authority area. Officers continue to make good progress in delivering on our priorities. However, the challenging circumstances we currently find ourselves in have inevitably meant that there has been some slippage on some projects, and the report seeks to rephase budgets to ensure delivery. The report also provides an update on the £68 million housing investment programme. Here we have accelerated £277,000 of funding to support our council house buyback scheme, and a further £48,000 of our rewiring, infrastructure and property refurbishment budget for additional works in Perth and Blairgowrie. Finally, I would again like to place on record my continued thanks to the Head of Finance, Chief Accountant and the Senior Accountant, Mr Jennings, for this composite capital budget report, and to officers across the council for their sterling efforts to ensure delivery of this administration's capital programme during these most challenging of times. I'm happy to move that we note the contents of this report and approve the proposed budget adjustments as set out within the composite capital budget and housing investment programme budget sections of the paper. Vice Convener, can I invite you to second the report, please?
Again, thank you very much, Convener. I would like to take this opportunity again to thank officers for the progress made in the delivery of this administration's capital budget. And I have to say, in the most challenging of circumstances, it's been a really difficult year, and I commend all the officers for their efforts in delivering the capital programme. So happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to comments then, and I have a comment from Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Bailey, I think. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. It's a wee bit of an echo of what Councillor Lyle has just said, but I think we owe a huge debt to our staff for working, and it's still been pandemic conditions that we've been working under, and certainly officers in the Road Maintenance Partnership and other teams, whether it be flooding or other capital projects, have really put their shoulders to the wheel. It isn't easy. And my comment maybe is one that I'd like the Chief Executive to take a note of, is that the ongoing pressures of COVID and of the need to deliver our capital programme does have an impact on individuals, and teams, and I hope we'll take that into account in our health and well-being and also our staff approval. Sorry, not approval. Our staff appraisal systems within the council in the future financial year, and just make that as a point I think that's important, and that we support our Chief Executive in these endeavours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm sure we'd all agree with your comments there, that we recognise the strain that our officers are under across the council and all the various departments brought about by the current challenging circumstances. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Convener. In last year's budget meeting, the Conservative group made much fanfare of an allocation of an additional £4 million towards structural roads maintenance. Today we're hearing that 1.2 million of that hasn't been spent. That's 30% of the money unspent in a year when COVID restrictions didn't impact on the ability of us to do this work. If my contribution on this topic today feels repetitious to anyone, then you're right. This is the second time that the Conservatives have won bold headlines about investing in roads and then quietly moved a significant portion of that money into future years when they were unable to deliver on their promises. The road structural maintenance budget also got raided to a tune of 2.6 million in 2020 after a 10 million pot was announced with great fanfare that year. I think it's rather apt that this is being done on Groundhog Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Donaldson, please.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just reiterate my comments from earlier, and that is I'm extremely disappointed in what is one of the main flagship projects in terms of our capital programme, Comrie Flood Protection Scheme, is subject to delay. I hear what's said, but also about the internal project manager. I hear what's said about the loss of the external consultant. I fully understand the pressures that exist upon our staff and the council in all areas, but really it is vital on this major project that we get an update, because I'm not even clear from what is being said if actual construction work will start even come the autumn of this year. So I think we've got to be appraised of the facts and brought up to date on the situation. Equally, I mentioned on the Shaky Bridge, it's 35,000 cost, but it is important in the path network around Comrie. Yeah, sure, there's problems with SEPA, but this has been a bit of a saga. It's gone on for several years. Again, we'd certainly like an update on that. And at one and the same time, I'd also like an update on the even longer running saga of the Crieff to Comrie core path. People are getting very frustrated by this one. I think I'd like to hear again back from Greenspace on this. I think it's always been the case we've wanted to see that brought about by negotiation. But if it has to be, then path orders should be imposed, and we've got to show the political will to drive this one forward. But the main one is the flood protection scheme. I'm really quite concerned about what I've just heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Ling, please.
Thanks very much, Convener. Yes, I'd like to thank the officers for the work that they've done in the last year in difficult circumstances, and they've managed to do their job to the best of their ability in these difficult circumstances. But also to wind out, there's been a lot of other people out there working extremely hard in even more difficult circumstances. I would like to thank them in all avenues of society. So now, as we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully we can move out and move things forward more quickly without having the problems of the pandemic and the restriction they had, which has obviously held back some movement over the last couple of years. And I look forward to a lot of these initiatives that were started by the previous administration moving forward, hopefully, and taken forward by the next administration, because there are quite a few of these things we're talked about today were put in train before 2017 election. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. I find these papers very, very important. They give us clarity and insight into the reality of council services and give information to not just us but the public about where we are and why we're where we're at. And I think that heads off a lot of frustrations within our communities about where we're going. I think, as I've said before, our officers have done an amazing job during COVID. I think all public sector staff have, and all the different organisations, and I echo the positive comments made by councillors already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. And Councillor Forbes then, please.
Yeah, thanks for that, Convener. I just really couldn't let Councillor Bailey's comment pass without responding to it. Sad I have to, because we've made so much progress in the roads in Perth and Kinross over the last few years. It's disappointing that these things come up. But just to reiterate, I would like to just point out we've resurfaced 152 kilometres of road. We've surface dressed 584 or 48, can't quite remember, kilometres of roads over the last few years. We've moved our position in the most recent Scott survey up by 4 points. We're doing remarkably well on roads in Perth and Kinross. You know, even in our ward, Councillor Bailey and I's ward, we've just resurfaced an inch dure. I think we're doing some great work, and it's disappointing for the staff of both Teesside Contracts and Perth and Kinross, who turn out in absolutely horrific weather roads better and safer for our residents, to hear comments like that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thanks, Convener. Just to echo what Councillor Forbes as Convener of Environment and Infrastructure has said, we heard very clearly in the answers that £1.2 million of that structural maintenance budget had not been spent in this financial year. That's out of a total of £16 million and is therefore 7.5%. The 30% that Councillor Bailey quoted was a manipulation of the arithmetic. And the point is that money is not being lost, it is being carried forward. So the total amount of money will still be spent on making those enormous strides in improving the Perth and Kinross Council's roads, as Councillor Forbes referred to.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Okay, looking to see whether anybody else wishes to comment who hasn't already commented. I'm not seeing any further requests for comment. Can we agree the paper, please?
Agree the report.
Agree.
Thank you. Okay, we move then to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Treasury activity report. And again, I will ask Mr. Walker to introduce the report.
Thank you, Convener. This report advises the Committee of Treasury activity undertaken during the third quarter of financial year 21-22 up to the end of December. Public Works loan board rates were volatile and longer term rates reduced with the emergence of Omicron. 50-year borrowing fell to a historical low in December 2021. And on that basis, the Council took out 4 loans totalling £90 million at the extremely competitive rates set out in the table in paragraph 3.2. These loans are not immediately required, but will deliver annual savings in the region of £728,000 against our original forecast assumptions. Treasury activity during the quarter is further summarised in Appendix 2, and the Council's total long-term debt rose to just under £619 million at the end of December. Investment income generated during the quarter was just over £356,000, an increase of £281,000 on the previous quarter, due to the increase in funds available and also an increase in investment rates. The Council's total investments at the end of December stood at £260.5 million, an increase of £57 million on the last position. There were no breaches in compliance with Treasury and investment policy, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. The Council's approved capital borrowing feeds through to the Council's prudential indicators, specifically the authorised limit or expected maximum borrowing needed. This indicator will require to be increased beyond £900 million, and the Council will be asked to approve this proposal in March when it considers the annual update of the Council's Treasury and investment strategy. Mr Jennings from our Treasury team and I are happy to take questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr Walker. Are there any questions on the Treasury Activity and Compliance Report? Councillor Donaldson, please.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, once again, to thank the finance team for the work they've done. And from what I can see, the 4 new loans from the Public Works Loan Board, these are remarkably low rates that we've got in at, and that's at 90 million. So I think that's to be commended. Could I turn to investments though? Scott, what's really noticeable, and it's not just since 30th of September, but also 30th June, 31st of March last year, has just been the massive turnaround in the structure of the investments we have. We've now got 45 million with foreign banks and institutions. That's an increase of 40 million. There's another 40 million with UK banks, and with other local authorities, although the average rate there is 0.66%, that continues to fall. I notice we don't any longer, it seems, list local authorities that we have investments with, which we used to do. Is the reason that we pulled right back from the local authority market, not obviously because of the interest rate, but because of the lack of available investments, that there's not a great deal, the reduced liquidity in that specific market.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. I'm going to ask Mr Jennings to comment on the detail there because he's immersed in it on a day-to-day basis. So John, I hope you're okay with answering that question.
Yeah, sure. Am I live? Sorry.
Yes, you are. Carry on.
Okay. Yeah, there's been a complete switch around in our investments. In the last 18 months, the local authority market was very buoyant. There's a lot of demand for borrowing, and the rates, as a result, stayed much higher than the banks. In the last 6 months or so, that situation has completely flipped, with the banks now increasing the rates, whereas the local authority market is basically awash with cash. A lot of local authorities have a lot of money, and the borrowing rates, the lending rates, have just reached rock bottom, and the banks are now much more attractive in terms of investing in our surplus cash flows.
So just to ask on that as a follow-up, John, as I'm looking at the average rates, and for other local authorities it's 0.66%, with UK banks and foreign banks it's 0.36 and 0.18, but the reason in part for this major swing round, and it is very significant, especially if you look at it over 6 months, is partly liquidity in these markets and greater security, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah, the local authorities certainly give more security, and the fact that the rates that we still have with local authorities remains high is because these reflect 1 and 2 year deals we undertook at the time, but which are still on the books. At the moment, banks, even for a 6 months deposit with a bank, you're going to and get returns in excess of the local authorities that we have left, and it's just a case of the loans to washing through.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I get your point. Okay, thanks.
Okay,
thank you, Mr Jennings. And Councillor Barrett, then, please. Sorry, Councillor Barrett, I think you're still muted. I know you see you're having some difficulty getting the mic to work
Yes,
there.
apologies for that. Yes, difficulty with my unmute button. I'd like to echo what Councillor Donaldson said regarding the work that the team have done in taking advantage of borrowing rates at or nearest their lowest levels, and we can see that from looking at the certainty rates graph in the report. With regard to the four amounts of borrowing that were done, can I ask, why was the smallest loan taken out when the rates were at their very lowest?
Mr. Walker, perhaps, are you?
Okay, thank you for that question. So we assess our cash flow requirements. We assess our requirements, and that was what our best estimate was at the time. We didn't know where rates were going to go at that. We wondered whether they plummeted or whether they're going to go any further. So we're trying to spread our risk a little bit. If they'd come down more, we might have gone back for more, but they've not gone that. Since 15th of December, I mean, the rates as of yesterday were back up to 2%. So we absolutely hit, borrowing at the right time. Hindsight, yes, maybe we should have gone a bit more, but we didn't know that, and we can't take that risk. But I think we've done quite a good job in getting to where we got to.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further requests for questions, so give it a few seconds if there is anybody. If not, I will proceed to move the paper. This Treasury update covers the period 1st October 2021 to 31st December 2021, and I thank the Chief Accountant for providing members with a comprehensive update on Treasury activity during the quarter. As we saw in the last paper, we are undertaking a significant amount of capital investment over the next few years. In that regard, I welcome the proactive approach shown with regard to our Treasury management, which took advantage of falling interest rates in the weeks before Christmas to borrow £90 million at extremely low rates of between 1.51% down to 1.26%. It is estimated that this extremely prudent and commendable move will save £728,000 per annum against our forecast interest rates in future years. This is a significant saving which will be of considerable assistance to the Council's finances going forward. Finally, I'm sure we are all pleased to note that there were no breaches in compliance with the investment strategy and policies. Members, I welcome this report and I'm happy to move that we note its contents. Vice Convener, will you please second the paper?
Thank you very much, Convener. Apologies, I'm having Councillor Barrett's problems as well. Just to in seconding this paper, I'd really like to thank officers for the sensible approach that they've taken to borrowing, and that approach will lead to significant savings for the council in years ahead, and I really commend them for their bravery in doing this, because these things are a calculated risk but also a challenge. So I'm happy to second the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Are there any comments on the paper? I take it, Councillor Wilson, that's a comment that you wish to make.
Sorry, I can work the off and on button. I don't know the difference between comment and question. Apologies, Convener. It's just to commend the work of the officers in finance and keeping this in. I think the comments have already been made, but I think it needs to be reinforced. This was a good move, and will help us in our capital programme in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there any other comments that anyone wishes to make? If not, can we agree the paper?
Agreed.
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 Okay, folks, thank you very much. I appreciate we only have one paper left, but I expect there'll be some discussion on it. So I propose that we have a short recess. It's 3 minutes to 11 now. Let's be back for 11:05, please. Just a short comfort break. Thank you.
Andrew, just to say that your chat about being missed out only came through to me about 20 seconds ago, so there's maybe some sort of delay.
I've just had to switch off my computer and start again, Peter. It was telling me I was no longer connected to the internet when patently the house was, because my wife was on her computer.
Well, maybe she was hoovering up all the bandwidth. You see something?
Well, it's interesting. We've never had that problem before, but you might be right.
I thought you usually blamed your cat, Andrew.
Both of them, yes.
That's discrimination ×2.
Sorry, colleagues, if you just bear with me 1 second, we're trying to get Peter Marshall into the meeting for the next item. I know he's coming in from some distance, but if you can just bear with us for another moment or two, and we'll see if we can rectify the issue, and we will get the meeting started again. Thank you. Okay, we'll close the recess and get the meeting started again. Welcome back, everybody. We are moving on to the last item on our agenda today, which is the Local Development Plan 2 Delivery Programme. I think we were having some slight difficulties getting Peter Marshall in, but I believe we have an alternative, and Barbara Renton will start off the introduction and Katrina will carry on thereafter. So if I could ask Barbara to start on item 7, please.
Thank you, convener, and I recognise that I'm a poor substitute for both Peter Marshall and for Brenda Murray. Unfortunately, neither of them, you know, sort of are here. Peter, we are still hoping to be able to join us, but we have a number of officers, including Katrina, who's the author of the report, who hopefully will be able to answer all of the questions this morning. So just by way of brief introduction, the legislation requires planning authorities to prepare a delivery programme to accompany the local development plan and to republish this every 2 years. The delivery programme sets out how the authority proposes to implement the plan by identifying the actions required for the implementation of each policy and proposal in the plan and who is responsible for delivering these. The programme was last updated in January 2020 and the committee is now being asked to agree an updated delivery programme for LDP2 for submission to Scottish ministers. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any questions, please put a Q in the chat function, and the first one comes from Councillor Ros McCall.
Thank you, convener. Thank you very much indeed. It's regarding points 2, 3, 2, 4 and 2, 5 on the report. I do note in 2.4 that this is a new process requesting developers and landowners to engage in this, and I'm very pleased to see that we're proactive and produce some guidelines and some assistance for them to involve in that, and I'm very pleased with the 40% response. But what more can be done to get landowners and developers to engage in this process? I'm slightly concerned, as it's intimated in 2.5, that this could move towards the removal of sites if we find that there is, if they're not having that uptake, and it's very essential then that landowner and developer involvement is taken into consideration to stop that from happening. So can I have some more insight on what more that can be done to make sure we really get a very cohesive and collaborative approach on this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you can just bear with me a second, I'm not sure if we have Peter Marshall into the meeting now. Are you with us, Peter?
I can't see him, so Katrina will be able to pick that up.
Katrina then. Katrina, if you can pick that up, please.
Thank you. If I could maybe just start off by perhaps clarifying there is a distinction between the delivery programme, which is what we're asking the committee to approve today, and delivery strategies, which is one of the policy within the local development plan. The information that we're getting from the delivery strategy certainly feeds into the delivery programme, but they are two different things, and it's just slightly unfortunate it is a little bit confusing because delivery programme and delivery strategy. In response to the councillor's question there, it's the pandemic, like so many things, affected our work as well. The intention originally had been to have a programme of workshops to try and engage directly with landowners, invite people in, you know, that were maybe struggling to submit information to us. But unfortunately, due to the restrictions imposed on us by the pandemic, we weren't able to do any of that work. What has been really good, as is noted in the report there, what has been great through this process is that the individual development plan officers who deal with the individual areas have been able to get in contact directly with developers, with landowners, start to build up a good relationship with many of them that previously perhaps we didn't have that direct relationship. Going forward, the intention is to just keep trying to get in touch with people, as restrictions ease perhaps and things open up slightly, then maybe we can get back to offering making an offer to landowners who are perhaps struggling and submitting this information. We might be able to meet with them face to face and help them go through the delivery strategy template so that they can submit that information to us. When it comes to potentially removing sites from the local development plan 3, part of the reason for introducing this new policy into the local development plan was so that if the council had a concern that there was a site that we had there that was being counted towards our effective housing land supply, but that wasn't delivering, and we had no confidence that it was going to deliver, then it would give us that opportunity to perhaps look for an alternative, or if there was a situation where there was a problem with it in delivering the site, there was a constraint on the site, that the council might be able to step in and offer some assistance. So that was part of the reason for introducing this policy into the local development plan in the first place. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And I note in the chat from Mr. Marshall, and I acknowledge that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm on the first page of the delivery programme at Table 1. And I would ask for confirmation that Phase 3 of the railway electrification specifically includes the Ladybank to Hilton Junction section of track, because if it doesn't, then the true intent of the ScotRail proposed present downgrading of the service from Perth south into Fife and to Edinburgh is truly revealed. And secondly, I would ask, I can't see obvious reference to the proposed park and ride service areas at by the Friarton Bridge and also in the northwest quadrant of the A9 Crosstay Link Road interchange, and I would be grateful for reassurance that those projects are both within the delivery programme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Katrina?
I'm afraid I have to give an apology here. The pulling together of the delivery programme is very much a whole team effort involving all the development plan officers and the development plan team, and also involving our transport policy colleagues. Unfortunately, I don't know all the detail of all the projects that are in there, so I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that detailed question, but it's certainly something that I can take away and speak to our transport planning colleagues and come back to you with an answer, if that would be acceptable.
Katrina, I think we recognise that you're getting thrown in at the deep end here because of technical issues, so please don't apologise. It's understandable that you're perhaps not got all the answers that we might ask. If there are things that you need to take away, if you could share it with all the members of the committee when you do have the response, that would be helpful. Mrs. Renton is looking to come in. Barbara.
Okay, so thank you, Convener. In relation to the two park and ride sites that Councillor Parrott is referring to, so the first in relation to West Confons is obviously linked to the planning application, which is going through its due process at the moment, and the second one in terms of the north of Perth in relation to Inveramond, that is work is ongoing through the Crosstay Link Road.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parrott. We'll try and get the missing parts of your question to you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, please.
Thanks, Convener. And my question's in the same zone as Councillor Parrott's. It affects all the discussion we're having with ScotRail, Network Rail and Transport Scotland about rail services, but with a particular emphasis on electrification generally, and also the joint bus rail interchange proposals for the City of Perth. When are we going to get a realistic, and Katrina, this is a difficult question, right? But when are we going to get a realistic update from our partners in these projects to help us achieve our ambition of making real progress in that? And I've got one other question, but I'll take my turn later on, Convener.
Thank you. I think perhaps John McCrone is riding to Katrina's assistance here. John, are you looking to respond to this question?
Yes, I can't speak with any great authority in the electrification, but I know colleagues in transport planning will be able to provide that information to you in terms of that response. I can, however, confirm that the master planning exercise in relation to Perth Station has now commenced, and myself and Alex Deans were in fact in a meeting yesterday. So we will have greater clarity in relation to proposals in and around the station in the not too distant future. So that work has commenced.
Okay, thank you for that, John. I'm not sure if you're able to get the other part of your question there answered just now, but if not, we'll get that to you. Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
And just a supplementary on the master plan, I'm not sure which iteration of a master plan. That we've had various master plans before, but anyway, I'll save my rest of my comments, but I look forward to receiving it in early course, Convener.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Wilson will do that. Councillor Hearn, please.
Thank you very much, Convener. And just to note, I've only got the one question. I have the same problem that Councillor Parrott had with delays in trying to get something through. My question is on item 4 on table 2, which is page 132 on the Perth City Transport and Active Travel Plan. And I note the response from Mr. McCrone to Councillor Barrett's question on paper 5. There's no mention in the progress notes that this project has consumed the Places for People project and other projects in North Muirton and North Inch. And I also note that in the progress notes that you've missed out a few of the areas. You've mentioned Bertha Park in Beralmond and Muirton, but you've missed out North Muirton and North Inch. And they are important in terms of this project. And Mr. McCrone in his answer said that he's just received notification that Sustrans are now funding the Places for People project that was originally funded by Sustrans and then they subsequently pulled out. But it doesn't mention anything about the funding for the other projects that have been consumed into this. And when it says funding in place on the table, it said not required. I don't think that's strictly true, because I think there is funding going to be required from Perth and Kinross Council in order to complete this. So just like clarity, A, on the areas and B, on this funding and what Sustrans are actually funding moving forward.
Okay, thanks. There's a fair bit to that question there. John, do you want to start this, or is Katrina best placed to start this? John, okay. John McCrone, please.
Yeah, so in relation to the kind of areas, etc., again, I think we can provide greater clarity on that, and as we move forward through the process, I think it probably reflects the time that the programme was actually put together. In terms of what Sustrans are actually funding at the moment, they are funding the initial design stages, so taking it up to concept design. And essentially what that does will determine where funding is best spent in and around those areas. And without prejudging that, that is probably likely to be in the areas you refer to, Councillor Ahern, in terms of Muirton, North Muirton, to take account of junctions and then active travel corridors along the Dunkeld Road to serve both bus movements linked with the park and rides in terms of the previous answers, as well as active travel to provide genuine choice to people in those areas to access goods and services. So we're in the process of finalising that agreement with Sustrans, but it is at this stage purely for design related work, which will allow us to determine costs associated with detailed implementation. We anticipate that that initial exercise will take up to September, and moving forward to kind of technical design stages thereafter, which will then inform our capital allocations. And as I said earlier, that will determine whether initial investment is made along in the Muirton areas or in the city centre, which is all part and parcel of the overall Perth People Place project and that corridor. So work to be done to kind of give the detail on it. Hopefully.
So is the table then? Sorry, is the table then not incorrect? If we're being asked to agree this table on the progress, should the comment in the funding in place comment be to be confirmed, not required?
It's going to be a negotiation with Sustrans in terms of the level of funding that they're prepared to put in, recognising the leverage in relation to overall transport investment. So the CTLR, the Perth Station project that we've talked about, active travel hubs on the Glasgow Road corridor, and getting to position where we have full clarity in terms of capital external funding support to match our own investment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ahern. Councillor Lane, please.
Thanks, Convener. It was on page 127, just the Lunkerty Pass of Burnham. To pass Burnham and dual carriage. Just to update, that is finished now. It's completed and it's making it much safer and slightly quicker journey than going at 40 miles an hour, as you will be well aware. So I'm glad that that's completed. But the question's about on page 129 about the Bertha Park link, and I was wondering if we have an update on that, because it's an important piece of work to alleviate, hopefully, a lot of problems coming into Perth. So I was just wondering if we had an update on that.
Okay, let's see if we can get you an answer on that one. Is that Katrina? Are you in a position to respond to this one?
I'm very sorry, convener. No, I'm not
Okay.
able to respond to that. But certainly, if I'm not sure if any of my colleagues that are on the call are able to come in here, but if not, we can certainly endeavour to get that answer to you.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else who's able to come at this point in time. My apologies, Councillor Lang, that we haven't managed to get an officer into the meeting that can help with your question, but we will endeavour to get a full response to that done and out to everybody on the committee at the earliest opportunity.
Thanks very much, convener, and it's just technological difficulties. There's no problem with that at all. So thanks for in advance for getting.
No, that's fine.
Update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. I've got two questions. I'm conscious that Councillor Wilson wanted to come back in, so I'll ask them one at a time. So on the appendix, the actual update to the delivery programme, can I just check on page 53? I just want to check for accuracy before this goes to Scottish ministers or gets published by the Executive Director. MU4 Angus Road Scone, which is a development proposal planning permission for retail food store. It says that construction has started. Is that correct and up to date?
So that's on page 172 of the report, page 53 of the
172 of our papers.
Yes,
page
that's fine.
The appendix, yeah.
Just so we know who we're going. Okay, I'm not sure if Katrina, sorry to keep putting you on the spot there, Katrina. I wonder if you're able to answer that, but if not, if there's anyone else in the meeting that can confirm an answer to Councillor Stewart's question.
I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I know I'm just...
Okay, no, please don't.
I mean, the way this has worked is all the various development planned officers have fed the information in from their own knowledge and from their own research, and I say from the delivery strategies as well. Unfortunately, maybe this is something that we take away for the next time that this is presented to committee, that perhaps we need more people from the development plan team and also from the transport planning team to be able to answer your questions directly.
I'm sure if we'd had Peter Marshall, Brenda Murray, who were able to be with us today, we could have had these answers, but we appreciate the technical difficulties that we're having and we have to work within that. There is a chat update. Is that in relation to?
Not in relation.
No, it's not. It's not in relation to yourself. That must have been a previous one. Okay, I'm sorry if.
Councillor Duff, sorry, convener. I think that's in relation to the Bertha Park link.
All right. Okay.
I think that's in relation to Councillor Lang's question.
Right. Thank you. That makes sense. Thanks very much. Okay, I'm sorry for that, Councillor Stewart. We will, as with some of the previous questions, get an answer to that as quickly as we can.
Actually, I think Mr. Marshall might have just put in a comment in the chat there, which says that a token start to the work means that consent is live. I'm just. I'm familiar with that park and ride site. I'm just unfamiliar with what the token start of the works actually is. And I would suggest that the wording there, construction has started, is slightly over-egging the pudding. I'll come back in after Councillor Wilson with my other question, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. I'll do that. I suppose it is a technical start to the work, and therefore consent is off and running, as it were. So I think it's accurate, but I appreciate the perception perhaps is not the reality. Okay, I think I would not see anybody else who's looking for a question, so I'll go back to Councillor Wilson, who I think possibly has a second question.
Thanks, Convener. On page 126, Road Junction at Broxden. I've read the words here and I think I understand them through all the terminology, but when are we likely to see progress on this, and do we know yet when that programme might evolve?
Okay. Is there anyone in the meeting who can respond to Councillor Wilson's question?
I'm sorry,
Katrina?
can I just clarify, Councillor Wilson, which project were you asking about there? The version of the document I'm looking at doesn't have all the full page numbers in it, so I'm just trying to find it.
In current terminology, this is the Broxton Roundabout and upgrades. And where are we with that?
Okay, well, we do have Ms. Renton, who's looking to respond, and Councillor Lyle, who can also provide some comment if need be. But Barbara, if you could start, please.
So my understanding is that discussions are still ongoing with Transport Scotland in relation to this, so that there is not any specific date or timeline for that, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come back to, well, I'm going to go to Councillor Parrott. I'll come to Councillor Stewart for a second question, and then Councillor Parrott.
Thanks again, Convener. So my next question is on the, we have the section of the delivery programme schedule on local development, Table 2 local development plan policy actions. I'm looking at page 20 of the schedule, page 139 of our papers. It's a question on policy 38, environment and conservation. The geodiversity sites, the progress note is that the geodiversity sites, it says geodiversity sites summer 2022. I presume that means when that will be finished, and biodiversity sites year 1 surveys summer 2022, year 2 sites in 2023. I had spoken to one of the officers a couple of years ago, back in I think October 2020, and I understood that the geodiversity sites were due to be completed by winter of that year. So you know, sort of 14 months ago. Has there been a further delay in the surveys for the geodiversity sites and the biodiversity sites?
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor Stewart. Who can respond to this?
Unfortunately, I don't think I can actually respond, but
okay,
I'm aware that my colleague Robert Wells, who's leading on this project, has had the assistance of a couple of students who've been carrying out the actual research work. I think there may have been some delays in that process, and I'm sure the pandemic will have affected that as well. But the information that we have there is from Robert, and that is the latest position as far as I'm aware.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Parrott, then, please.
Thank you, Convener. I'm at item 47 on table 2, the local development plan policy actions relating to the River Tay catchment area. I'm a little surprised and perhaps a bit concerned to see that under partners participants, the Tay District Salmon Fisheries Board and the Rivers Trust are not included there, and perhaps they should be, or perhaps someone can explain why they're not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I wonder if anybody is able to respond to the
All I can say is I don't have an answer as to why they're not included, but if you feel they should be, then we can certainly do that.
If I may say, I think unless there's reasons why they shouldn't be, that they're certainly they're certainly interested parties, I would have thought. Thank you.
I'm sorry, convener, I wonder
Yes,
if I can come
yes,
in.
of course.
We're working on some kind of strange time delay in relation to Peter's answers. So in answer to, sort of Councillor Stewart's earlier question, then what he's posting up in the chat is the geodiversity sites are mostly done, and the biodiversity sites were delayed by, sort of a reduction in the number of graduates that we were able to support that. I'm working on the basis that if I speak long enough, Peter will be able to post a question, sort of post an answer to the question. I think that the issue, looking at the wording there, it's lead partners and participants. So it may be that sort of ourselves, SEPA and SNH are the lead participants, Councillor Parrott. But I would imagine, sort of that there is, sort of a lot of discussion with the, sort of with both the organisations that you spoke about. But, sort of we can confirm that.
Okay, thank you. I am not seeing any further requests for questions. So if there are none, I will proceed to move the paper. Legislation requires planning authorities to prepare a delivery programme to accompany the local development plan and to republish this every 2 years. Delivery programmes are a key tool in instigating action and coordinating the activity of the various parties involved in the implementation of policies and the delivery of proposals in the local development plan. Our delivery programme will help to ensure that the LDP2 delivers sustainable growth through shaping better quality places and responding to climate change. In preparing the delivery programme, authorities are to take into account the views of all those involved in the delivery of the plan. A key objective of the planning review is to place more emphasis on the delivery of sites, and to assist this, a new policy was included in the LDP2, which requires landowners and/or developers to prepare a delivery strategy which demonstrates a realistic programme for the delivery of their site. Although the response has been mixed, the process has been very beneficial in starting to build relationships between development plan officers and landowners and developers. And this is vital in helping ensure that the LDP delivery programme is kept up to date and progress in the delivery of allocated sites is recorded. The programme was last updated in January 2020, and the committee is now being asked to agree an updated delivery programme for submission to Scottish ministers. This is an important document for the delivery of LDP2 and for promoting Perth and Kinross as a sustainable, more attractive, competitive and vibrant region. My thanks to Katrina Walker for her report, and I'm happy to propose acceptance of the report's recommendations. Vice Convener, will you please second the report?
Thank you very much, Convener. A great deal of consultation has gone into the preparation of this plan, and as we're all aware, under difficult circumstances. And I also note that its new policy on site delivery, and just on previous comments around that the major developers, as far as I understand, are all on board as far as delivery notification with their sites. I'd like to thank officers for their exhaustive work in bringing this together, and I'm happy to second the application and submission of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I have a comment from Councillor Wilson, please.
Convener, thanks very much, and thank you for the officers for the report. This is really important because a lot of our infrastructure and strategic development proposals are encompassed in this report. And having said that, I'm sure our officers and many of the members of the council share my frustration in the lack of progress that we have on key parts of infrastructure, which is thwarting our ambition as a council for developing our major projects in our city and surrounding areas. I take the examples that I've mentioned earlier, Convener, of electrification of the rail line, at least to Perth and beyond. The bus rail interchange and also the Broxton Roundabout. I'll deal with these in turn, just briefly. Between the dithering of the Scottish Government in its capital programming of infrastructure, between the existence of Network Rail and what appears to me to be a parallel universe compared with the rest of the public and private sector, the ScotRail's ambivalence, and I think Councillor Parrott referred to this regarding the disastrous plans for the timetable for getting to Edinburgh in the future, and also the lack of engagement by Transport Scotland. It's almost a quadruple whammy of thwarting our ambition, and I often feel sorry for our officers having to push against what it seems are locked doors in relation to funding, in relation to project planning, and in relation to sheer engagement of getting these projects off the stocks. That refers particularly to the electrification issue, but more particularly to the project to have a bus rail interchange. I hear that we're going to get another outline plan. Well, I've seen at least 3 outline plans in the last 20 years, convener. Some of them have been thwarted by actions by Network Rail, like building a new carriage shed on where the bus station was going to be at one time. So I wish everybody luck in that regard, because it's going to be a hard toil. But we really need these agencies to get round the table, and I hope that Councillor Lyle, in his leadership role, will pick up that as something that needs to be tackled. As far as Broxton Roundabout is concerned, the blunt truth is the Scottish Government have no resources for this. Transport Scotland have got no money for it, and all you get when you ask Transport Scotland what's happening is, well, we're doing a survey. You find that actually the surveys have been based on groundwork done by our officers in the council, either recently or 2 or 3 years ago. So that's another exercise in complete inaction by Transport Scotland and a lack of funding. Now, if we don't, convener, get a grip on providing some funding centrally, as well as developer contributions for the Broxton roundabout situation, then there's little point in going ahead with the CTLR, because we all know in this room that the CTLR traffic will funnel into Inverarmond area and then round the Western Bypass to Broxden, at least in the short to medium term. And if there isn't action taken on the Broxton roundabout, we're just going to move the traffic problem. We're not going to solve it at all. So I hope that we will all work hard at trying to get these problems moved on. I'm not saying they're going to be solved, but I certainly am more than willing to play my part in it. And thank you for listening, convener.
Thanks.
I've now got that off my chest.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, I'm not seeing any further requests for comments, so can we agree the report to adopt the delivery programme as set out and instruct Mr Renton to publish and submit the delivery programme to Scottish Ministers?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you everybody, and can I just thank Katrina Walker again for stepping in at the last minute, what was a difficult session, but I appreciate very much your assistance in trying to answer the questions that were put today. Okay, everyone, that I think concludes our meeting this morning. Thanks everybody for your participation, and I'll now close the meeting.